So I spent 5 years working Iran malign influence in Iraq for General Petraeus and Odierno by name request. I focused on the penetration of the Iraqi security forces, used the Lebanese Hezbollah or the Lebanese armed forces model in Lebanon to demonstrate what Iran was doing in Iraq, right? So the Hezbollah is not afraid of the LAF in Lebanon at all. We continue to pour money into it. Hezbollah's co-opted it. It's neutralized it. It's basically a speed bump. And not one media source has talked about the Lebanese armed forces. So let's go back to Iraq. In Iraq, the militias have infiltrated everything. Iran owns the political parties in Baghdad. Iran owns the security and intelligence apparatus and owns the economic portfolio for Iraq. Iraq is basically life support system for the regime. And now these militias are attacking, U.S. bases. And, I have, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see a lot of the things that I put out there. I've been doing some videos just to talk about it. And I get great feedback from people inside government, secretly like, hey, keep doing what you're doing, man. I can't say what you're saying. So my badge of honor is I get to say what they can't say. And I do consider that an honor because I've always been the, tell it like it is. In any organization I've ever been part of, I played the eighth man, the Israeli eighth man concept. That's what I do. And in that capacity, I started writing, producing op-eds, being on anywhere from CNN to, BBC Iran, which is basically a corrupted, regime-controlled entity. But I've been across all U.S. media platforms, publishing the Wall Street Journal, Foreign Affairs, Washington Post, on all these things. Then I was invited into the Hudson senior fellow at the Hudson think tank, and courted a position in the Trump NSC. But I'd stayed outside. It was better for me. There were more opportunities, could be more flexible. I didn't want to work 18-hour days for a boss who's going to take all my work and say it was his, and that's what one of my buddies said, man, you don't want to be in here. Derek's just going to take all your work and you're just going to be Derek's. You're just going to be on the other side of a phone waiting for Derek to ask you a question so he can say it's his own analysis. So, I learned Arabic at 18, just a backwards. Oh, wow. I stumbled backwards into this career. It's been fast. I didn't even realize 20 years was up because it just went like that. After 9/11, it was nonstop, and then being in the Intel community, I left that in 2015 or 2013. And then started writing, became a senior fellow. And now I'm an expert witness in terrorism cases related to Iran because I'm an expert on what the IRGC does with Sunni and Shia groups.
So there are kind of three things I want to talk about broadly. One is the question, who's in the right in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Because obviously that's a question that divides people across the world. Then I want to talk a little bit about support in the Western world for Jews broadly and for Israel.
Right.
And how that is changing currently, perhaps declining or on the wane. And then finally, right, I want to talk a bit about what's currently going on. And I have a few questions that I want to ask you about the ground invasion of Gaza and some related questions about the Hamas attacks on Israel on October 7th. So first, on the question of who's in the right, actually, let me just put that question to you. To be very crude about it, I mean, I think it's fairly accurate to say that you can divide much of the world into kind of pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian camps. Obviously, there are a lot of people with more nuanced positions. The first question I would ask you is, would you put yourself in the pro-Israel, pro-Palestinian, or somewhere in the middle camp, and why?
Okay, so I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and I've always avoided the Israeli-Palestinian question because it was always toxic. So anytime somebody asked me about that, somebody from the Middle East, somebody from Iraq, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, I said, listen, I'm not an expert on that situation. I believe Israel is our ally in the region, our strongest ally in the region, our most capable ally in the region, and needs U.S. support. And then I say candidly, listen, the Palestinians don't want peace. Hamas doesn't want peace. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad does not want peace. Lebanese Hezbollah does not want peace. So anytime we court the Palestinian Authority and try to give them a peace plan, they weigh that against being flown all over the world and put up in five-star hotels and getting all this donor money coming into them because they live very well. The Palestinians do not. And I kind of leave it at that. And I said, but this has polarized me a bit. I've always been pro-Israel. And because I've always known that the Arabs that I'm speaking to, these are government officials. They want a Palestinian state. I get the feeling they want a Palestinian state so that Palestinians will get out of their countries. Mm-hmm. The Palestinian is very smart. The businessman, the educated Palestinian is a lot of competition for the region. They are headstrong. You've heard the term, they are the Arab Jew. Mm. They are smart. They are competitive, and they will kick your ass here and there when it comes to being savvy, being smart, being knowing how to negotiate, and in that group right there is not in Hamas. That group right there is not in Lebanese Hezbollah or PIG, right? That's the victim traveler. Mm-hmm. That is the Palestinian that we know in DC and New York, Rashida Tlaib, that kind of Palestinian, right? But October 7th, there's no more veil behind my support for Israel. Mm-hmm. October 7th is their 9/11. If you look at the number of Israelis killed to include Americans, it's the equivalent of 250,000 Americans dying in one attack,
right?
Terrorist attack. And we went to war for 20 years on two fronts after they killed 2,996 Americans. And Israel just suffered that. Everybody knows. Right. I didn't know people that died in the tower, but I've met them since. But nobody was related to me. I didn't have friends that died in the tower, but I went to, I was gone 28 days later to Afghanistan after 9/11. And everyone in Israel knows somebody that died or was injured or is missing. And that just makes it's their 9/11. And to be told, hey, just get a little, get some revenge, kill some Hamas, leaders, and then stop. But that's not the design, because the enemy has a vote. The enemy doesn't want it to stop.
Right.
The enemy wants to condemn Israel here for its invasion of Gaza or its impending invasion of Gaza. But you saw the Houthi front just lit up. The Iraqi militias are now attacking U.S. positions. Lebanese Hezbollah and the IDF are having skirmishes. Mm. So this is something that by design Iran wanted. And what I wanted to say real quick about, I'm a former NSA guy. I'm a former, human intelligence guy. And what I'd like to say is the Biden administration has set such a high bar for evidence in this attack. They want the signals intercept of somebody from the IRGC saying, go, do it now, commence operations. That's not how this works anymore, right? Hamas is made more capable by Iran. Let's just say this was a cross-border skirmish. Let's just say 20 missiles were launched. Iran still played a role in providing material support and lethal aid to Hamas. Mm-hmm. This is different. This was a planned operation to go in and be so horrific that it would require an Israeli response, an Israeli invasion.
Because I'm trying to listen to a wide range of opinions on this, and I was listening to the Bad Faith podcast hosted by Brianna Joy Gray, the former spokesperson for the Bernie Sanders campaign, and she was interviewing a Palestinian rights activist, and I found their conversation pretty disturbing. At one point, I think the Palestinian rights activist said that his understanding is that the Hamas operatives intended only to attack military installations in Israel. Those were overrun much more easily than they anticipated. And then they didn't really know what to do and engaged in this intentional, indiscriminate slaughter of Israeli civilians, as if that somehow made it not as bad.
Right. They didn't plan to be so successful. And after they realized they were done in 15 minutes, they decided to just go kill some more people.
Yeah, and like, but the suggestion was that that somehow makes it not as bad. And I mean, this connects to a broader issue, which is, I mean, obviously a lot of people have pointed this out, but I've really felt it because I forced myself to watch a lot of those videos, and the callousness that much of the left in the Western world has displayed in response to this kind of slaughter of Israeli civilians, it's very disturbing. Obviously, it's related to this question of who's in the right, because those people who are callous, they will often concede that, terrorism is wrong, killing civilians in order to advance a political agenda is wrong, but you can tell their heart's not really in it. What their heart is in
It's their
is,
caveat so they can go and say what they're about to say afterwards.
yeah. Is it your impression that that is true? That the Hamas operatives did not expect to be so successful and actually did not originally plan to engage in that intentional indiscriminate slaughter?
The music festival was a target. The music
Yeah.
festival was a target to capture foreigners, because that is a music event that a lot of foreigners were going to be at. That was intentional. That was a goal. The goal was to be so horrific as to bring Israel in, and the goal was also to get hostages to be able to kind of have bargaining chips and leverage, especially based on the precedents the Biden administration has set by giving $6 billion to Iran for 5 people. For 5 people. So what are they going to do for 12? What are they going to do for 20 Americans? So that's that calculus. So if this was just a cross-border thing where they just hit an Israeli vehicle and launched some rockets, hit a military vehicle, it was purely military, Iran would still have material and lethal aid that made Hamas more capable. This is different. Iran authorized this because it would bring Iran into a war. You don't have a proxy go, it's like having a nephew, right? Being the Sopranos and having your nephew go and beat up somebody who's a captain in another gang without authorization. Like, what are you doing? You're going to get us into a war. That's not what Hamas did. Hamas didn't do something that Iran didn't know about. Hamas did something that Iran was like, okay, go. We're ready now. We have our land bridge that we didn't have in 2007. We have more sophisticated guided missiles and rockets that we didn't have then. Now, Lebanese Hezbollah has those. Hamas has those. The PIG has those. They launched the dummy rockets to try to diminish the capability of the Iron Dome, and then they go in with the specific ones, right? So all these capabilities are set, and Iran's ready. So Iran looks at their calendar and says, okay, when's the U.S. election? That's how long we have. We have 12 months, we have 18 months, 16 months, whatever it is, to do this. And all we have to do is turn the international community against Israel. You saw that hospital story. You saw the media just pounce on that.
Right.
Breaking news, IDF strikes hospital, killing 300 to 500 people. Anybody who's ever worked in the Middle East knows that you subtract the zero from any math that's given to you by a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
And if you look at the actual numbers of people killed, it's 30 to 50, not 300 to 500. And it's a parking lot, and it's a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket. But the media wanted to believe so much that Israel did this.
Right.
So that is the issue here is,
well, and I mean,
deep-seated hatred is there inside somebody to want this to be true and be disappointed by the facts. And that's what we're struggling with.
I mean, one of the things that has bothered me the most in all of this is that a very basic fact about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict going back decades is that Hamas wants their women and children to die. They intentionally prevent Palestinian civilians from evacuating places where Hamas is concentrated, knowing that it will lead to their deaths, so that they can basically display their dead bodies to international media. And, well, one thing I've been struck by is a lot of the pro-Palestinian advocates in the Western world, when they get on TV shows and debate Israel and Palestine, they just talk about body count. This is how many people, this is how many Palestinians have died versus how many Israelis have died. And I'm not saying that's totally irrelevant, but they don't even mention the context that gives rise to these Palestinian casualties, which is, my understanding, and maybe I'm naive, is that Israel generally does not intentionally kill civilians. In fact, as a matter of policy, it does not intentionally kill civilians. It is always going after hostile combatants, and collateral damage is necessary precisely because those hostile combatants use, again, their women and children as human
Right.
shields. And like, I just think if you're going to defend the Palestinian resistance and organizations like Hamas, or try to contextualize it, you need to at least bring those facts up and grapple with them. Like, but I see those facts largely being ignored
Well,
by
yeah,
people like Cornel West and Noam Chomsky when he talks about
right.
this issue.
Yeah, but they're never going to come to this side of the argument. But you're exactly right. Hamas needs dead Palestinians. You know, something we saw even in Iraq. It was the first time I saw it was Iraqi women would come out and say, "What are you doing? Don't launch the rocket system here. You're going to get our children killed." That's what your children are for. They're supposed to be martyrs. That's exactly what Hamas has done. This is a tactic going back to Lebanese Hezbollah training Al Qaeda to do the same thing. If you have a high value target, make sure the car drives slow enough to where children can follow your car, so that if it's taken out, there's collateral damage. And we can say, look at all the children the Saudi airstrike hit in Yemen, or the U.S. airstrike hit in Afghanistan, or the Israeli, strike hit in Gaza or Syria or Lebanon. It's by design. And to prevent civilians from leaving an area that you basically made an arms depot, that you're basically launching missiles and rockets from, and they say, "What are you doing? We're going to die. Shut up. Go back in the house. You're supposed to be a martyr."
Yeah.
And that's what people don't understand. And Israel gives them.
This is how the current left-wing worldview works. Once you code a group as a victim or an oppressed group, you really give them a moral free pass where they can engage in all kinds of behavior that you would consider aberrant or horrific if a non-victim group engaged in, but you just let them, and you explain it away by reference to the circumstances, the difficult circumstances in which they operate. I mean, I think so.
And that in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like the free pass given to the Palestinians is similar to the free pass given to like inner city blacks, for violent crime and things like that.
And it emboldens and it empowers, and it results in violence, because the violence is now not something you're worried about committing, because you are a victim and you're basically lashing out. And we're seeing that here in thefts and overrunning department stores and doing things like that.
Riots, yeah.
But when does it actually turn to violence? When does it actually turn to violence? And Hamas has already been given that free pass, and all of these these militias that are supposedly representing the victims. So one of the arguments I make is, if you're, I'm in DC, right? I'm saying things that people don't say out here, because if they said it, they wouldn't get kicked out of their think tank, because they're funded by Qatari money, right? Mm-hmm. They're part of the next Democratic administration in waiting in some of these think tanks, but they're all heavily influenced by Qatari money. They can't say what I'm saying because they'd be kicked out. So they have to take these very nuanced positions, ignoring October 7th, ignoring what happened, and going into broader context over time to make arguments where they can say something that was horrific, but without saying directly, Israel deserved it. And that's the problem that I have. I find that, like I said, 28 days after 9/11, I was gone. I was on my way, and basically served out the rest of my military career and my professional career working these issues in Iraq and other places. But, if you really want to support Palestine, if you really care about Palestinians, you should be against Hamas. You should be against the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. You should be against Iran. I don't conflate Sunnis with Al Qaeda. I don't conflate Shia with IRGC proxies. Why are you conflating Palestinians with Hamas?
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I've heard some people on the right do that, and I think that's stupid. Although there is a legitimate question: what percentage of Palestinians support what Hamas did in Israel on 10/7? I do think that question matters. The fundamental moral question here is the killing of civilians to advance a political goal ever to be excused? I mean, obviously you can frame that as an abstract question, and it causes us to look at some aspects of our own history. I mean, I think in Dresden, we intentionally killed a bunch of civilians in order to, in a sense, advance a political goal, which was to end World War II.
Hiroshima, everything.
Yeah.
the difference between the strikes that we just talked about in Dresden and other places is a pilot could drop a bomb and not see the aftermath. You know, this is up close and personal.
It's a great point.
They want to kill them. They want to terrorize them, kill them slowly. I watched the videos too. I had to do that with Al Qaeda. I had to do that with ISIS. I had to do that with the Taliban. Watch executions and intimidations and just the callous way of marching somebody up, kicking them in a hole and shooting them and then setting it on fire. It's up close and personal. It's hatred. So the pilot dropping a bomb is the military objective is to neutralize the German positions that are hiding within the civilian population. We want to end the war. They don't want to end the war. They want to continue the war.
Yeah. No,
up close and personal.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make about up close and personal, because there is a big difference between
they're not squeamish about it.
Yeah, between an agent who would do that under any circumstances and an agent who would not, because the pilots dropping the bombs, whatever else you may say about them, they would not do what Hamas did to they would not do to German civilians, I don't think, what Hamas did to Israeli civilians. Now, obviously, people like Noam Chomsky will say it's simply false to suggest that it's less morally problematic to drop a bomb that kills 1,000 civilians than it is to do, I guess, what Hamas did. But I think all of us, I think most people in the world, Arab, Palestinian, and non, would be more likely to want to have dinner with someone who would not be willing personally to engage in the kind of behavior that Hamas did. Yeah.
The difference is you have a uniformed military under the rules of law that could be punished by their own government for violating the rules of law or doing war crimes, versus a terrorist organization that doesn't fall under that. So when a reporter misstates or uses prisoners of war instead of hostages, like, no, they're hostages. They're not prisoners of war. This is not a uniformed military. This isn't a military that follows the rules. Dropping bombs from aircraft against enemy positions, uniformed enemy positions hiding in the civilian populace, is different than a terrorist organization coming in and being able to get away with anything because they don't fall under any Geneva conventions, right? They can do whatever they want. And so I do think there's a difference. But again, it's the intellectual academic argument that all these things are equal because of this and because of that. And of course, somebody like Chomsky already believes that Israel is nothing but terrorists in uniforms, or the U.S. military was nothing but a colonial power seeking its dominance, and therefore that's terrorism too. Those are simple arguments for classrooms, right? Those are simple arguments for sophisticated academics that want to hear those arguments. Say that's a very eloquent way of saying that. But the bottom line is the person actually doing the killing, the pilot, doesn't want to know what's on the ground, what's happening.
Right.
Unless it's, hey, I'm targeting Al Qaeda positions and ISIS positions. I want every one of those guys dead. Mm-hmm. But the pilot dropping a bomb to end a war is different than a terrorist, exploding a bomb to start one.
One last thing I want to say on this subject of who's in the right is I always try to imagine what someone on the left would say. And I think, what they would say is, first of all, their view on the broad Israeli-Palestinian question is that Israel is in the wrong and the Palestinians are fighting a righteous cause. And we can get into the details of why, but that is their view. So in other words, the Palestinians have very legitimate grievances and a very legitimate claim that they are being denied. Furthermore, they have no hope of succeeding if they play by conventional rules of warfare, because they're totally outgunned by Israel and the United States. So up to that point, I can concede. So my personal opinion is that there are a lot of legitimate grievances and claims on both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian question. So if that's true, and one side, Israel, is much more conventionally powerful than the other side, I can see how that's a difficult situation for the Palestinians, because it makes it less likely that they're actually going to be able to have their grievances and claims addressed. So I can go that far, but the distinction between my position and the left-wing position is, first of all, that the left-wing position seems to be Israel is oppressing Palestine. Palestine has legitimate claims and grievances. Israel does not. And that very brutal tactics are either permissible or at least we can excuse them and look past them in light of that fact. So
Right.
that's really just a comment, but I don't know if you want to say
Oh, no, I'd
anything.
love to say something about it. When we hear terms like Israel is conducting an operation to exterminate, or to, terminate Palestine, those things are just not correct, right? But the one thing that I would push back on if I was having this conversation with somebody on the left is uh, Israel has been surrounded by countries that want Israel wiped off the map and supported by a state sponsor of terrorism that uses the Palestinian issue to wipe Israel off the map. They developed a terrorist organization called the Quds Force, which means the Jerusalem Force, to take Israel off the map. And the Palestinians are the victims not only of, trying to establish their own state, but being used by these outside actors as launching pad for wipe Israel off the map, right? So the Israel-Palestinian, situation. What do you think about that? I was like, well, it's a small part of it because Israel is surrounded. Israel is a good country in a bad neighborhood, so to speak, right? And the Palestinians are the ones closest to touch it, and so they're being used by everyone, to include their leadership. They haven't had success because these suits from the Palestinian Authority don't want to just have it settled. Yasser Arafat said the same thing. And you go back to that, it's really simple, but it's accurate. It's not academic, but it's accurate. If Israel laid down their arms, they would be wiped off the map. If Hamas laid down their arms and Hezbollah laid down their arms, there'd be peace. The seized territories, the reason the Palestinian, the areas are separated and they're not adjacent and they're not connected. Those are areas that were won in conflict. Those are areas that were seized by Israel because they were launching pads once again for attacks against this country. So I look at the Israeli-Palestinian issue as a country trying to defend its people against a country being used by all the other countries in the region to be provocative, to be this, hey, you're a victim, remember that, because you're our foothold into this area. And so that's how I look at it from a military security standpoint. If I was on the ground, I was talking to, I did this a lot with Syrian refugees and Iraqi refugees during the ISIS campaign. Your heart goes out to them. You want to help them out. You know they're suffering, but you can never convince them they're suffering because of their own leadership. They're suffering because of Hamas. That $100 million that's getting ready to go into Gaza, the only entity there that is capable of distributing it or getting it to the right people is Hamas.
Right.
So Hamas is they're going to use it to reward and punish, just like Saddam did with water rights and electricity and everything else. Just like every militia does, when we say Hamas charity, it's selective. It's to reward and punish. It's to keep people compliant. And I just look at it like that. It's easy to care for the family and the little kid that's suffering, right? But then you step back and you see that kid a year from now, and the kid's been indoctrinated into this Hamas culture where he wants to go and kill people.
Right.
You've seen the video, you've seen the books. I mean, I bought a book when I was 18 in San Francisco in an Arab market, and I bought it because it had Israelis walking into a room and killing the parents, and the little kid sees it, and then the little kid grows up to be a militant and launches an RPG, killing an IDF tank. It sells very well the oppressor victim narrative to the young Palestinian. I just wanted to say something about, we're talking about how horrific this attack was on October 7th. You remember the Syrian conflict, right? All those dead children. And the only time any child actually caught the attention of the international community was that little boy in the back of the ambulance that was just covered in dust, just looking shell-shocked. Remember that photo? Yeah. And everybody was like, oh my God, this is horrific. They weren't looking at the dead kids. They were looking at this kid because they were like, it's all they could stomach, right? Yeah. So a reporter asked the doctor at the hospital where that kid was treated. Like, so what about the kid that was in the back of the ambulance? The one was, is he okay? And he goes, what are you talking about? He goes, the kid, the one that, he goes, you mean the one that's alive and okay? I have kids that are just died, kids that are about to die, dead kids, and you're not asking me about them. You're asking me about the kid that you could stomach. You're asking me about the child that you could stomach. And that's what this is all about too. They don't want to look at these videos. And like we talked about with the hospital bombing, they wanted to believe Israel did it, and they don't want to believe that Hamas cut off the heads of babies. You know, they don't want to believe that, because then that would, you know, that shores up the narrative. And I would argue that if the babies never happened, if they didn't kill the babies, it's still bad, because they took babies as hostages and they have them in cages and they're messing with them. You've seen the videos where they're asking the Israeli little girl, like, where's your family? Where's your family?
Oh no, I've not seen that one. I've seen kids being bullied by
and they're kind of messing with her. She's a little kid and she points that way and he goes, oh, they're over there, huh? And then he like pushes her head. And it's like that is a little girl, but to you, she's an animal.
Right.
You don't care if she dies, because you don't feel anything, because she happens to be Israeli. That is an animal on the other side. When I was in Iraq, I was talking to a Sunni, you know, tribal leader. And I said, how do you guys just kill somebody who's not Sunni, or kill somebody who's, you know, because they're Shia? He goes, because they're dogs.
Yeah.
And he stood up, he walked over, and there was a cow like next to me. Slit the cow's throat. Cow fell down. There's like pool of blood just streaming out of this cow. And he goes, that's what I think about the Shia. Just that easy to kill another human being, because to them, they've lowered them all the way down to an animal.
Yeah.
And that to me is that makes me sick to my stomach, to, you know, to know that evil exists, and then to see.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I
played it into this, support for the Palestinians. It's okay.
Right. And to kind of excuse it, it's because they've been oppressed that they're behaving in this way. Israel settling in Palestine and displacing Palestinians does not lead in any discernible causal chain to that kind of brutal inhumanity. It seems to have deeper cultural roots. So
well, it's taught. When you're taught to hate as a child, and now you're 40, because you've been taught to hate for 40 years, you taught your kids the same thing. Their kids will teach. Nothing's going to change. There's not going to be this isn't going to result in a free Palestine.
Yeah.
And it's free already. It just wants to be adjacent. It wants to be, you know, a whole. And, you know, to say that Israel is occupying, like, no, not since 2005, you know, but facts have no bearing on the truth, right? When it comes to an emotional person on the other side. It's frustrating, because we're losing the information war. We're losing support for Israel here. I mean, here it's being shored up, actually, despite the protests, because you're even seeing BLM supporters say, you know, the supporters, not BLM members, but people that support the organization say, wait, this is bullshit. What are you doing? I don't know if you've seen some of the
I have
prominent people, you know, ex-football players saying, you know, fuck you guys. You can't support Hamas. We can cuss on this podcast.
Sure, it's fine.
But it's, you know, you see people confronting them on the streets of New York, and it's like, okay, cool. I like this, because people are falling back on, like, wait a minute, radical Islamist terrorist supporters. And yeah, it's kind of like that Shia and Sunni guy I talked about, you know, with the guy that hated Sunnis. If there was an Israeli there, they'd both probably go against that person, right? So when you take away that fight in the U.S. population between, you know, let's say black and white, liberal and you know, Republican and Democrat, all the bullshit, right? And you kind of coalesce around something like, hey, this doesn't feel right. You know, I don't like that guy, but we're not killing each other. But these people here are celebrating the fact that 30 Americans are dead, and they're supporting a terrorist group. And I got a problem with that. And we're starting to see that more. The more, you know, it's that famous phrase, you know, once they tell you who they are, believe them.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that. I'm a little more pessimistic about the United States. I mean,
I'm right there with you on many fronts, but go ahead.
Well, no, of course, but even on this question, I mean, I agree that we have more of an immune response to Islamist terrorism and violent anti-Semitism than maybe other Western countries do, but we're trending in the wrong direction, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've argued elsewhere that, and this is kind of obvious, but the dominant morality in our society now, a kind of civic religion, is what I call cultural leftism.
Right.
And Jews and Israel occupy a strange place in that story because, on the one hand, Jewish people tend to be left-wing, like in the United States and elsewhere. They tend to be left-wing. They tend to support the left. They played an extremely important role in funding and leading left-wing movements, including social justice movements up until the present. Also, obviously, Jews have been persecuted severely.
Right.
You could argue more severely than any other group, and very recently. And so they're clearly victims in that sense. On the other hand, they're very rich on average. They're very influential financially and in terms of narrative shaping because they occupy so many important positions in the media and entertainment worlds. And Israel is a powerful country that is a kind of settler colony in the sense that there were settlers who did ultimately displace some of the natives. Those are some broad reasons why the Jews in Israel occupy a mixed position from the perspective of the dominant public morality in the West today, which is cultural leftism. And finally, a couple of basic facts are making it so that over time, Western countries, including the United States, are going to become less and less supportive of the Jews in Israel. One is changing demographics. My understanding is that in America, for example, the groups that are most supportive of Israel are white Christians, especially white evangelicals. That's a declining demographic relative to other more rapidly expanding demographics. And the Holocaust itself is becoming a more and more distant memory that people don't know about. So I think for all of these reasons, the fact that Jewish people and Israel do not fit perfectly into the victimhood category because of their wealth and their influence and because of the nature of Israel's founding and its current level of power, because of the changing demographics of the United States, and because of the fact that the Holocaust is receding in our memory. I think all of that, it must be serious cause for concern among Jews in the United States, Jews in the Western world, and supporters of Israel everywhere.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I mean, in today's world, the like you said, the Holocaust was a long time ago. In today's world, like, well, that happened a long time ago, as though it doesn't matter anymore. We already know about that. What's your latest,
what have you done for me lately?
What have you got in the last 24 hours? Well, October 7th is the equivalent of our 9/11. And you're seeing polling, like you said, it's like, wow, support for Israel is going down. And you're basically seeing the result. I mean, I think it's going down in the youth demographic here in the United States, because I'm not trying to be funny here, but I think they like wearing the Palestinian wrap. To them, it symbolizes, allegiance with Che Guevara.
Che Guevara, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah,
che Guevara,
it's like, okay, look at, it's like, yeah, I'm down. I'm a rebel. I'm down with the cause, not knowing that it just seems more. I'm trying to say that the youth in this country are dumb. And if they see something that they think looks cool, they're going to go with it. It looks cool to wear that. It looks cool to wave a flag. They're not waving Hamas flags. They're waving Palestinian flags, but they're conflating the two. And like you said, Republicans are as well, but they don't know any different. I don't think they'd even know if they were carrying a Hamas flag. They would even know they were. I don't think we saw a Taliban flag flying in one of the rallies. I don't think anyone knew that was a Taliban flag. The issue is, if you support Israel, somehow you support a military. I think most people in this country just see Israel as this military state in this bad neighborhood, as opposed to the technology coming out, as opposed to all the entrepreneurial and all the basically all the progressive tech,
right.
A lot of meaningful things. I'm not talking progressive in politics or.
No, I understand. I understand.
But I'm talking about
cutting edge technology.
Yeah, cutting edge technology and just tip of the spear stuff, right? But our youth doesn't see it like that because, it's popular to go along with the flow. And unfortunately, that trend line is directly tied to what's popular. If you walk down the street with a Star of David flag or an Israeli flag, you can expect to be accosted
Oh yeah.
in this country,
Yeah.
in the United States, in Nashville, even in these other places, because the changing demographics are, I would love, former Intel guy, I always looked at the unwed military age male and what they're capable of. And the majority of the border crossings in this country are unwed military aged males. How many of those unwed military aged males are in these protests? And if I was a Hamas, so I've always been taught to think like the enemy. If I was an Al Qaeda leader, Hamas leader, ISIS leader, I'm looking for the talent in that crowd.
Yeah.
I'm looking at who wants to be violent. I'm looking at who doesn't look like me that wants to be violent, so that we can break that thing where the FBI is only looking for Arab males. Like, no, you can get an Afghan male, you can get an African American male, you can get a Haitian, you can get people from all these countries that are coming in and say, hey, how do you feel about how America has mistreated you? Would you like to get a little revenge for a couple $100? You look at the talent. And then you also look at how it's accepted. Again, like you said earlier, once you get victim status, you can do more shit, right? You can push the envelope. And that's what's happening now. And then you have a media that will protect it. And then you have a January 6th like event. If you want to talk about protests and storming the Capitol and doing all these things, that's now okay because it's part of the victim mentality. So it's okay to do what they're doing. Rashida Tlaib is not an inciter or an insurrectionist. She's simply, supporting victims' rights, and that is something we're not going to win. We're not going to win that information war, right? Because we're dumb. The same people protesting in the Capitol are the same people that were protesting LGBTQ issues a week ago or a month ago. It's the same crowd. It's the same lemmings that just follow an issue,
Yeah.
And so they have no idea. They're an inch deep on knowledge. And we're not going to penetrate that because it's what? If they start to change their minds and think like, I do, or, can put things in perspective, they will be attacked by their own peers.
Yeah. One last thing I'll say about this. It has been interesting that certain people who have placed exclusive blame on Israel for what happened on October 7th and expressed oblique support for what Hamas did have suffered consequences in the United States. As you suggested, a number of universities have seen donations taken away or people resigning from boards. There has been a kind of cancel culture now coming after elements of the left for their statements about October 7th. But I guess what I want to mention in that connection is that up until that, cancel culture for the last 5 to 10 years, and really even before that, going back 50 years, was driven by the broad progressive elite, the broad college-educated progressive elite, and what was fashionable opinion within that group. Right. And so, the reason people get canceled for being racially insensitive or insensitive about the LGBTQ community, for lack of a better term, or insensitive about certain other topics, is that good opinion among the college-educated progressive and elite in the United States is that you can't say those things. And so through a set of mechanisms, people pay a serious penalty if they trespass on those taboos. That's not what happened here. So there has been cancellation of people who have spoken insensitively in the wake of October 7th, but it's not because they said things that trespassed on the pieties of the progressive college-educated elite.
Right.
Right? It's interesting to think about why exactly there has been such a strong response and there have been cancellations. Because again, it's not coming from outrage on the part of social justice activists. These were social justice activists saying the insensitive things.
It's almost as though you said the elite leftists who empowered the social justice thing now is saying, has been shocked by this attack on October 7th, saying, wait a minute, where am I at in this fight? And I've spoken to people that I never would have spoken to before. I mean, I love talking to everyone, right? But people that I disagree with on a political or national security level are all coming to this is wrong, what happened, and we need to. They're not comfortable yet coming out, but they're comfortable back channeling their They're
Interesting.
concerned about where the left is going, and that's comforting because there's been a coalescing of the classic liberal, the Haight-Ashbury liberal, or the Greenwich Village liberal, that questioned authority, that didn't believe the media, that never held up a New York Times saying that's been debunked, right? With the conservative about self-responsibility, protecting the country, a strong foreign policy, a deterrent strategy to where we don't get ourselves in these types of wars. Coming together back, 6 months ago, it was about free speech. It was about cancel culture. It's about being attacked. It's about things being weaponized against people. It's about not trusting the media, not trusting your government. Now I'm under threat. If I walk down the street and somebody knows I'm Jewish, am I under threat in my own country? And I hear that every day. Hey, am I okay? I'm like, listen, you got to be vigilant. Just situational awareness. Know what you're doing. Vary your patterns up. But the threat is here, and it's from one of these victim social justice warriors that has now found a new cause to champion. They didn't even know what the Palestinian issue was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But now they're like, yelling because it's a cool thing to say, right? The little phrase about from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, all those things. And it's almost as though the same people that created this social justice ability to move them towards a political issue that they care about have now seen what they've done and said, oh, I can't believe we've empowered this, because now they're turning their weapons towards us. They're turning their.
I mean, I've heard a lot of people say this. People like me who have been really critical of the cultural left, social justice left for many years now are saying this seems to be a turning point where the social justice left has gone too far. Maybe it's let the veil fall or something like that, and it's going to cause a lot of people to sour on the social justice left and kind of break out of that coalition and maybe move more toward the center. But I mean, I agree that a number of people who are on the social justice left have expressed dismay at the reaction among some of their comrades to October 7th. But I worry that that's still kind of a fairly marginal phenomenon, and that this is simply the way that public opinion, left opinion is trending in the country. It's just trending more and more toward not really caring about the Israel question, not really having a particular sensitivity toward the Jews. The people who kind of man our most prestigious institutions, they basically agree that Israel is very oppressive and Palestinians are in this terrible state, and anything they do in response to it really can be excused.
Right. If they take this attack on October 7th and then they intentionally weigh it against everything so that it dissipates, right? So the outrage, they don't have to feel as outraged about it. It's like, well, this is a culmination. This is a reaction to all of this. No, this is a provocation. This is bent on bringing the region into war, and Iran being able to fight to the last Arab to get what it wants. And that's something that I love saying to my Arab friends that disagree with me and agree with me in the Middle East. I'm talking about military commanders and these. I said, Iran's going to fight to the last Arab, right? You know what they think of you? They think that you're lesser than them.
Yeah.
And they think they can rule you by the thumb. Ataturk said that the best way to control the Arabs is to just put your thumb on the back of their neck, or under your thumb would mean putting a stick on the back of their neck.
Yeah,
because they're compliant. And every dictator in the Middle East knows that if you have the ability to make somebody disappear in the middle of the night, and then make the person that's asking where they were disappear or go to jail, then that's power. And that's what they've had. And the Arab Spring kind of knocked some of that stuff down. But this is bigger. This is not a response from an oppressed people. This is a igniting event for a regional war directed by Iran.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that's
well, okay. So let's move to that, because we don't have unlimited time. So moving to the present, let's just talk about a few issues related to the current situation. So first of all, am I right that it is pretty much a certainty that Israel is going to engage in a ground invasion of Gaza? It's just a question of when they begin.
Well, I keep seeing that, right? I keep seeing it's being delayed, and then the more it's delayed, the more rubble there is. And anybody who's ever been dismounted, I've been dismounted, walking around the streets of Iraq and places, it's hard to have a ground invasion when you can't walk, you can't invade, you can't drive tanks in these areas. Um, the ground invasion will be focused on the tunnel
The
network.
tunnels, right?
That's where Hezbollah is. They'll be able to hit you from this building, go into a tunnel, and then go across to the next building and hit you again. So that's what they're thinking about. But they're also, are there hostages to be rescued? Right. So I think the majority of the Americans and the foreign hostages were moved out of Gaza, a week ago, or moved either to Lebanon or moved to Syria or maybe even moved to Iraq, just to get them out of Gaza, because a living U.S. hostage is more valuable than a dead body. I don't know that they're going to do the same with the Israeli hostages, unfortunately. I think Hamas still has control of them. They're going to use them as human shields in these tunnel networks. If they are encountered by Israelis, it'll be the Israeli, hostages standing in front of a Hamas guy firing between their legs at the Israelis, just like they did in Somalia. A ground invasion, I don't think it's typical where you're going to be able to, you can bring tanks in, but it's only going to be to look at those buildings where they're firing from, to take those buildings out. The tunnel networks is where the focus is going to be.
Right.
But we've seen the front open on the Lebanese, the Lebanon-Israeli front. We've seen the Houthis launch. We've seen the Iraqi militias start to move towards Syria and into Lebanon, so they can be part of this fight also. So again, just like the Israeli-Palestinian issue, this isn't an IDF Gaza issue. This is an IDF Gaza state, and the Lebanese, the Lebanon-Israeli front, and everything else. So it's never as simple as Israel and Hamas, Israel and Gaza, Israel and Palestine. It's Iran and Israel.
Okay, so yeah, I read an article by Edward Letbach about the ground invasion, and he, like you said, it's going to be basically exclusively focused on the tunnels. He anticipated that it will take about 2 weeks. So the tunnels, it's the sort of industrial infrastructure of the Hamas war machine. It's also, right, I think, where Hamas leaders live. They live in within the tunnels as well. And I think there are also exfiltration tunnels to, right, Egypt, I guess. And
yeah, everywhere they can get out.
Okay. And so I guess could you tell me what you understand about what Israel's aim in destroying all of these tunnels is? Like, what will the effect of that be? I imagine it is to destroy Hamas's capacity to pose a threat to Israel. Right. I don't know to what extent they're thinking they're actually going to get the Hamas leadership this way, because one question for me in all of this is, why don't Hamas leaders just get out of Gaza now? So can you speak to some of those questions?
Absolutely. And some of those leaders may have already gotten out of Gaza, because so what's going on right now before the invasion of Gaza is to cut off those exfil tunnel exits, so that if you collapse those, you keep them all inside, right? So that's been the focus, and that's probably ongoing now. That's probably already happening, because you don't go in to have the cockroaches scatter. You seal the exits, the cordon, keep them in, and then you go in. You allow an exfil route. So right now, Israel's doing everything. Hey, listen, Egypt, you either let them come out that way because we're going to kill everything inside, or you don't. Once again, demonstrating that the Palestinians are supposed to be victims. They're supposed to die. And it's Hamas and other countries that are not treating them like Ukrainian refugees. They're not welcoming them in. They're saying, no, we don't want them. We don't want them. And Hamas is saying, you're not going anywhere. And so they're going to cut off the exfil for these tunnels, wherever they think they are. You seal those off, then they're inside, then you starve them. That's why they're against giving them. Why are you going to give them food and water when we're trying to starve them out? If you want to give them food and water, give it to the refugees coming out on the Egyptian side. Let them all be fed and taken care of there. The international community should be saying Hamas is not letting them leave. Hamas is keeping them. They want them to die. They want them to be starved so they can use them as victims again. Feed them outside of the cordon. Because if you give them the ability to sustain themselves, Hamas is not going to give this aid to the civilians. They're going to give it to the people inside these tunnel networks that can continue to fight the Israelis, right? You starve them out, you basically do a siege.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't give them this a week into this war to sustain themselves. You can give it to them after 30 days. Somebody should say, listen, after 30 days, we're going to give you this aid. And in the meantime, you need to let everybody out because all the food and water are going to be on the Egyptian side. Okay. And there's going to be a screening process there with Israeli intel and Egyptian intel to make sure no Hamas fighters coming through. And there will still happen. Low-level fighters will still get through saying, I'm a dad, I'm a brother, I'm whatever. But the military-age males, regardless, will be separated. Mm-hmm. And they'll be screened and they'll be vetted to see who is a Hamas person, right? Hamas fighter, Hamas terrorist. So you seal off the exits, you starve, and then you go in. So the Israelis will be able to see them before they see the Israelis in these tunnel complexes. They'll knock out the power, so there's no cameras, there's no control. They'll wait out the battery level. So a GoPro, how much battery does GoPro have? How long can it last? They'll wait that out. And they've been doing that. They've been delaying it. They've been cutting off electricity. They want to exhaust their ability to see the Israelis coming, right? Mm-hmm. And then they'll see them before Hamas sees them. They'll see them in these tunnel networks before Hamas sees them. And they'll be able to see if they see hostages. Now, okay, we got Hamas down here with some civilians. They're using as shields. So they'll take another option. I also believe that, unfortunately, they do believe that these hostages will die, that Hamas will take them out regardless.
Yeah.
But that's how this operation is going to go. And the international media is going to put pressure like, 200 Israeli soldiers died in this week. How much more can this population tolerate? Like the U.S., Osama bin Laden believed if you simply killed enough Americans, they'll leave. We did when they did it in Lebanon. We did it when they did it in Somalia. We've done it the whole time, right? And 9/11 changed that. They killed 3,000 Americans, and we didn't leave. We came in force. We stayed for 20 years, and we decimated Al-Qaeda. We decimated the Taliban, only to give it back to the Taliban and Afghanistan. Also give it back to Iran, or give Iraq on a silver platter to Iran. But that's what it's going to look like. Mm-hmm. So key leaders, just like we've seen in any U.S. military operation in Iraq, the key leaders get out, right? The key leaders get out before the siege, but they keep their fighters there. You guys stay there. So the majority of the ranks inside of Gaza right now are probably at the captain equivalent level, the major equivalent level, but maybe even a colonel. But the senior people are out to fight for another day or to join Palestinian Islamic Jihad or Lebanese Hezbollah in the fight. Mm-hmm. The hostages, the Americans and the Westerners are probably already been moved out. And we should be looking at those facilitation networks and anything that is happening now that this land bridge has been secured between Iraq. So a bunch of buses took Kitab Hezbollah militants to the Syrian border. There's nothing saying that they're not coming back with hostages or not coming back with something. We need to pay attention to that. We're not. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about that. I think the president, we have about 12 U.S. hostages, 12 to 20, and we didn't hear anything about it. We don't know maybe it's good that we don't know their faces because we don't want to let Hamas know that they have Americans, but we should still know the 30 dead Americans. We should see their faces. But, I think that's the way the operation is going to go, getting back to Gaza. They've already sealed off the exits, the exfil routes, the ones they can. The tunnels that go into Egypt, Sisi and Israel are tight. They're close to that. They're both against Hamas. They're both against the Muslim Brotherhood. They're both against Iran. And, but the ones that go into Lebanon, the LAF, the Lebanese Armed Forces are U.S. paid direct, we fund them, we arm them, we have advisors with them, and we haven't heard a single word on the LAF position on this whole thing.
I mean, how significant do you think the security benefit to Israel of conducting this operation in Gaza will be?
I think Israel has to do this operation to maintain its security. They have to put in a deterrent strategy to maintain their security. They have to be devastating. They have to show Iran that you just lost a proxy here. You lost a proxy. You know, Iran has Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas, and it has Lebanese Hezbollah. We're going to take one of those away from you. We're going to take two of those away from you. Palestinian Islamic Jihad is going to be part of this too. And then Lebanese Hezbollah, do they weigh it? You know, we've seen Nasrallah be very pragmatic in some of the decisions he's made. You know, when Israel conducted airstrikes in Syria against IRGC positions and Iraqi militias, Lebanese Hezbollah, when there was rocket fire into Israel, it was Lebanese Hezbollah that told the Israeli Defense Forces, it wasn't us, it was those guys. They conducted a 6-hour air campaign and decimated Qasem Soleimani's missile and rocket factories, the ones that were static, right, and killed a lot of high-value targets. And then Soleimani and the regime in Tehran said, hey, Putin, what are you doing here in Syria if you're not here to protect us? And Putin says, I'm not here to protect you in your fight against Israel. I'm here to secure a port and an airstrip and keep Assad in power. That's my goal. Keep Assad in power so we can stay. Oil and gas in the north. And so Israel has been able to do these things, and Nasrallah said, hey, it wasn't us. Remember the two Hezbollah fighters with the drones? They were getting ready to launch a kamikaze drone attack into Israel, and they were destroyed. And then Nasrallah did a face-saving gesture by taking out a inflatable Israeli Humvee. And basically it's BDA, battlefield deception stuff, right? And then stood down. The Hezbollah fighter may be different. There may be some internal divisions in Hezbollah right now. Hey, let's go join this fight. And senior leadership saying, now's not the time. But there are these skirmishes going on right now.
Yeah.
They are happening, but it's not a full-on, move. Go ahead.
Well, okay. So in terms of explaining the timing, like why this happened on October 7th, 2023, it's my understanding is that the main explanation of the timing is that, okay, Iran let this happen. So October 7th doesn't happen if Iran doesn't give the green light. Iran gives the green light on October 7th, 2023, because Israel is getting closer and closer to having normal relations with Saudi Arabia, which is Iran's most important rival in the region. That was a very threatening prospect to Iran. And so it wanted this attack to happen so that it would inflame public opinion across the Arab world, including in Saudi Arabia, and make it impossible for the Saudis to normalize relations with Israel. So that's the major factor explaining the timing. And then maybe also the fact that Israel is very internally divided for domestic political reasons.
That's the reason they went out.
Oh, okay. So it's more that than the Saudi-Iran stuff.
And we're in the same scenario pre-October 7th. So Israel's focused on all these domestic politics. They're not focused at all externally, right? Everything's internal. And I think that's one of the reasons for the breakdown in their intelligence network to be able to identify these things. They're distracted. Our Pentagon is distracted. Our internal politics in the United States is very distracted. We are vulnerable to an October 7th style attack. Not at that level. They don't need parachutes and hang gliders and things like that. But when I first heard this thing, it's because of the Saudi-Israeli thing. It's not because of that. They're not worried about that. Saudi Arabia is, when you said it's their main rival, it's their main rival in the religious spectrum. It's not their main rival militarily. They're not worried about the Saudis. One of the things I've worked with the Saudis, and if they had an IRGC Quds force, they would be a rival. They don't. They have inshallah, throw some money at a group, everything will be okay. They're very lazy in their strategies and what they want. Iran marries a proxy and there's no divorce. There's just a dead wife. Saudi Arabia courts a mistress and the mistress takes advantage of it. The mistress wants a better apartment, more money, and Saudi's like, okay. So I don't buy that. I don't think it was a big deal because Saudi under the table supports Israel and is anti-Iran, knows that Israel is the most capable ally to balance Iran. They can say publicly the peace deal is off for now because we're assessing the situation. Under the table, we're with you. You can fly over Saudi Arabia and attack Iran. That was really what these relations were all about. Besides the economic benefits and the symbology, is being able to fly.
Okay, that's interesting, because I think the perspective I just laid out is widely disseminated right now, that the normalization of
it came out within hours of
yeah.
the attack that this is the reason they did it. I'm like, oh, come on. I can see the people in DC saying, well, they wanted to destabilize. Well, so if you're in the Trump administration, it's because they fear the Abraham Accords and they're afraid of what we're doing. If you're in the Biden administration, it's because we're continuing to do this. Jake Sullivan couldn't have had worse timing when he said that the Middle East has never been more stable than it is right now, a week prior to all this, right? It's that thinking. So within an hour of the attack, it was because of this. I'm like, come on.
Okay, that's interesting.
That's a think tank injection into the narrative that's accepted by journalists. And I'm not saying anything bad about journalists, but I'm saying when I see a journalist interview another journalist standing next to a map talking about a military situation, I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
You're both journalists. You're half an inch deep on this. You're acting like you're a battle captain.
Yeah.
Inside of a tactical operations center conducting, a briefing to a general. And it's laughable, these simple narratives injected, like, and I hope I'm saying this the right way.
It's fine.
It had nothing to do with that and everything to do about it being the right time.
Yeah. Okay. And by the way, so it's the right, and is it the right time not only because of the polarization within Israel about Netanyahu and the judicial reform, but also one other thing I heard is that
a lot of the weakness of the Biden administration. Also, good.
Well, yeah, and please mention that. But one other thing I heard was that a lot of the Israeli military has been deployed to the West Bank, and so in that sense too, there was kind of an opening between Gaza and southern Israel. But yeah.
So you basically can make a very obvious threat in chatter here, so the Israeli intel guys saying, hey, listen, we need to focus our forces on the West Bank because we're hearing a lot of chatter. And then you don't hear anything over here, and then something happens. So that's our enemies are very smart, and some American politicians get in trouble for saying that, but they're smart, because this was a smart attack. This is something that Iran can rely on the Biden administration defending it by saying, we have no direct evidence that Iran was involved. And then Iran's basically saying, yeah, of course we're involved. We're meeting with Hamas leaders in Doha, our foreign ministers there. We just met in Lebanon. Hamas just went to see Putin. The Hamas leader went to go see Putin. All these things are right there in front of you. But I guess my point is it's the right time. If you look at the last year, 2 years of the Obama administration, what happened? ISIS rolls in. We have the Iran nuclear deal. When a president is perceived as weak, in the case of Obama, weak and on his way out. In the case of Biden, weak and on his way out, our adversaries take advantage of things. Even if it's a Democrat challenge, primary challenge, even though the window's closing right now, they view Biden as weak and distracted and in the pockets of China, and in China's pocket, in definitely in Iran's pocket, with all this pro-Iran policy and these economic giveaways and looking the other way on sanctions. It's the window. What do you need to effectively be able to destroy Israel? You need a year of constant, military capability, military attacks, terrorism attacks under a weak president that's looking at Ukraine, looking at Putin. Now Iran has caused something in the Middle East. China's already threatening Taiwan, posturing. All three of our main adversaries, or if you want to call China a geopolitical, competitor, are testing this administration and overloading it, because the same people that are making all these decisions are the same people that worked with Obama and gave us the JCPOA, worked during the ISIS crisis and didn't do anything, called it the JV team, right? This is Austin, this is Sullivan, this is Blinken, this is Biden, right? And then now fast forward, the same team from Austin, Blinken, Sullivan, Brett McGurk, and Joe Biden failed in Vienna with the JCPOA talks, right? Let Russia and China have a front row seat to that failure and what they were willing to give away. Even the Russian foreign minister said, I cannot believe how much Iran is getting from the United States to get them back in this deal. And then they see them fail in Doha with Afghanistan, and then walk their way backwards into actually supporting the Ukraine. Initially, the Biden administration wanted Zelensky out. Hey, we got a C-130 coming in to get you. Let's get you out of there because the Russians are going to be in Kyiv in 3 days. Didn't happen. I'm glad he stayed. But now you have this, and it's the same team of fuck ups. Excuse my language. The same team that failed with. If you can't beat the Taliban, meaning you can't out-negotiate the Taliban, you can't out-negotiate Tehran, how are you going to out-negotiate Putin and Xi Jinping, right? How are you going to do any of those things? Or Xi Jinping, whatever they want. What some people say it. Just edit out, put in the good version. How do you say it? Tell me how you say it.
Xi Jinping, I think.
Xi Jinping, okay. I've heard it both ways. But it's overwhelming. It's the same people. Austin was my regimental commander when I was in the 82nd Airborne Division. We had to give him pictures because he wanted to see pictures. He didn't want to see words. We had to make it very simple for the old man. Keep it simple for the old man is what they said. At CENTCOM, when we were working in Afghanistan and Syria, he was in charge of CENTCOM. He's like, all right, keep it simple for the old man. Now he's the Secretary of Defense, and he's just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Overwhelmed. Anyway, this is that window. It's called a permissive environment. It's green light chaos for our adversaries. And you open up the Iran front, see what the U.S. can do. Now, we can support these things. We can continue to send weapons. It's an economy. People are making money. So you give it to the defense contractor, they make it, they pay more salaries, they buy more stuff, they buy homes, they buy cars. So there is economic stimulus in our war capabilities to be able to continue to sell weapons or give weapons to the Ukraine, and which we should do. I believe in that. Corruption is their constitution, right? It's their backbone for everything they do. Somebody who's not corrupted will not be effective.
Right. That's the same in
be able to destroy.
It's the same in the Brazilian Congress, which I studied in a former life. Yeah.
Same thing in every Middle Eastern country. Without bakshish, without kickbacks, without corruption, you're ineffective. If you say, hey, that's against the rules, you're done.
Yeah.
Right?
So you don't know the rules, clearly.
Yeah, I understand that. But this is a permissive environment. This is where Biden is the weakest he's ever been. You saw John Kirby tell Biden's press secretary, Jean-Pierre, whatever her name is, hey, can you shut him up? Can you stop this? Can you get him out of there? Because they were asking him questions, and he started, and it's our adversaries see that they're like, what? This is go guys, go wreak havoc. But I think if Iran does too much, I think China will say, hey, all right, settle down a little bit, because China is very influential here in a cut off the funds, stop buying Iranian oil and gas, and tell them you're not going to destabilize the region like this. But they want the U.S. to be, engaged, not militarily, but resource intense engagement, and to be able to weigh. They want to sit back and see what the U.S. is doing to weigh their decision making, their timing, so that they can do other things. Can the U.S. handle the Ukraine, the Middle East, and a Chinese invasion of Taiwan? The answer is no. And this is where we're at. This is not Israel, Hamas. This is Russia, China, Iran, U.S.
Yeah.
And this is the central point right now. This is the second front has been opened. So it's Ukraine. Yeah. This is the next front. And then the third front, of course, is China, Taiwan.
And obviously you don't think that's, you don't think that's coordinated.
I think it's like-minded. It's simple. It's like, all right, let's take advantage of this, of the U.S. It's not like China and Russia are telling Iran how to conduct a Hamas operation. It's just like, you do your thing, here are your parameters, here are limitations, go.
Yeah.
We're gonna do our thing, here are China's telling Russia, you can't drop a nuke in Ukraine. Come on. Just keep going, because the US resolve is starting to waver. Yeah. Just keep it going. Okay, we'll keep financing you, keep you in the fight, because US resolve is diminishing, right? And the same thing here. The one advantage our adversaries have is as soon as they start a provocation, 50% of the U.S. population is with them.
Right.
Meaning, with them in the sense like, hey, don't do anything about it. It's not our war. Let's focus here. And then you have that U.S. division, right? That U.S.
Right.
internal conflict where you have one side against the other side.
Right.
They're like, foment that, foment that, foment that. Keep that going because it gives us more room. We're always behind the eight ball, right? When General Mattis said when he was in charge of the Pentagon, he said, it's my job to give State Department one more day, one more week, one more month, one more year to do their jobs. The enemy's counting on that. Yep. Give them that one more day, one more week, one more month, because with each diplomatic engagement with a Tony Blinken or Pompeo was a good Secretary of State when it came to Iran. But who's his predecessor, that Trump oil guy out of Texas? I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah. Rex
Yeah.
Tillerson. Yeah.
Rex Tillerson was not. Rex Tillerson was a oil gas guy. Let's keep the oil flowing. Let's keep the gas flowing. Let's ignore violations. Our enemies are counting on weak diplomacy. And the more they get away from the U.S. banking system and the U.S. dollar, that means State Department doesn't have that smart power tool in their toolbox anymore. Because if you cannot punish them economically, then the only option is a kinetic threat.
Okay, so I know predictions are tough, especially about the future, especially about the Middle East in the future.
Right.
But a couple things. First of all, if you had to forecast how many Israelis and Palestinians will die as a result of the Israeli ground invasion of Gaza, that's one question. And then
Right.
What, according to your forecast, is the likelihood that this will turn into a much larger kinetic war in the Middle East involving Hezbollah and or Iran? Those are the two questions I want to ask.
As far as the numbers, we'll get accurate numbers from the Israelis. We will get inflated numbers from Hamas, and the international community will believe those numbers. If you hear, 300 civilians were killed, it's 30. If you hear 500 were killed, it's 50. There will be civilian deaths. There will be more, unfortunately, Palestinian deaths than there will be Israeli deaths. But those deaths can be blamed on Hamas for not letting them go. They can be blamed on the region for not letting them come in to their areas, but because they know what they're getting. Do you really want this victim group to come in that's militant and cause problems for you? No, that's what Gaza's for. Put them in Gaza, put them in these other places. And those are Arab heads of state saying that. You've seen what the Palestinian refugees have done to Jordan. You've seen what the Palestinian refugees have done to Lebanon. And it's the region saying, no, that's where they're supposed to be. But where they are is a war zone because of Hamas. Where they are, they're targets because of Hamas. So on the broader war, the broader region war, I've always said this is what war with Iran looks like.
Wait, sorry, before you go on, how many Israeli soldiers do you think will die? Just roughly, or is it impossible to say?
It's impossible to say because they're not going to just go in and charge the objective. They're going to use technology. They're going to be able to see around corners before Hamas can see around corners. They're going to be able to put in stun grenades, kill targets, or just say, how many Hamas fighters did you see? I saw 30. How many hostages did you see? I saw 3. You make the decision, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's tough, but you have to make those decisions. So we don't know.
Yeah.
We'll know the Israeli numbers. We won't know the civilian numbers because they'll be inflated. But unfortunately, I think hostages will die in these scenarios because Hamas is not going to have a room full of 30 hostages or 40 hostages. They're going to have each 10-man team will have 1 or 2 hostages. Each 20-man team will have 3 to 5. Each 30-man team it'll be like that. And there'll be a calculation like, okay, what is the cost of this operation?
How about just How about just orders of magnitude with the Israeli soldiers? Are we talking, do you think, tens, hundreds, thousands?
We lost 3,000 in Iraq and 3,000 in Afghanistan over 20 years, right? roughly. It's more than that. And I think 8,000 deaths in Iraq, or 3,000 deaths in Iraq. And it's kind of right there, right? It's right
Yeah.
about 8,000 over 20 years. And we were victims of car bombs and things like that. It wasn't in the door-to-door, room-to-room clearance operations that the Israelis are going to go through. I would say less than 1,000.
Yeah.
Because Israel was going to be smart about this, and I would probably weigh more towards the hundreds. But every day we see an Israeli soldier killed before the invasion. We have Israeli soldiers that have been killed in the last, couple of days, but it's ones and twos, right? But they will be smart about it. They're not going to bum rush something. They're going to be smart about it. It's going to be the special operators, the bomb tech guys, that do that. The military, the uniformed military, will be part of the cordon. And once it's neutralized, and go in and do the sensitive site exploitation, where they go in and try to gather intel and gather connections to make the argument that Iran was, there's an element to show that Iran was complicit, Lebanese Hezbollah was complicit, all these other groups.
Right.
So that's what I would say, somewhere between.
Yeah. So back to what you were saying about this is what war with Iran looks like, and that's where
the war. Right. This is what the war with Iran looks like. It's a playbook, right? It's a series of provocations in order to get concessions. That has been the pre-war standard for Iran. This is where Iran doesn't have a military to deploy. There's no conventional force coming across Iraq to go into this area. It's only militias, and it's about punishing and killing and getting the U.S. to miscalculate, right? But the U.S. is more worried about miscalculating than Iran is, because Iran's really not in the fight. They're directing it. We did see some missile and drone strikes against Saudi Arabia that came from Iran mainland. We did see that. We have seen Iran fire at a U.S. drone and U.S. aircraft in the Strait of Hormuz. We've seen these gunboat things. That's not going to happen here. This is all about rocket launches from the Houthis, about Lebanese Hezbollah, and I think it'd be more of a rocket and missile war from the Iran side, using the Iraqi militias to be the cannon fodder, to be the idiots that charge across and do stupid things and get whacked. Hezbollah's smarter than that. Hezbollah knows how to maneuver at the battalion and brigade level with equipment. And what that means is they can prepare a target with artillery, with rockets. They can move in under the cover and have air defense assets protect against Israeli aircraft coming in, but only line of sight defenses, not a capability to shoot down an aircraft before it gets even close. They don't have standoff capability. So Hezbollah is concerned about economy of force. It's a military term, meaning we're only going to put so many in, we're only going to do so much. The Iraqi militias are like, yeah, you saw them during the ISIS campaign. They got their asses kicked. There were 10,000 militia members that were killed in what's the place? Taji, in Tikrit, fighting 180 ISIS fighters, because they just charged with the Allahu Akbar and the flag, supporting Iran and Hussein, and they got their asses kicked because there was no military movements. They were a convoy. They went into IEDs. They got rocketed. They got shot by snipers. They were killed, and they had to hide the numbers of casualties because they were so high. Now, if 10,000 of them were killed, it could be less, but it was significant because they don't know how to fight. Every success the Iraqi militias had in Iraq was after the U.S. leveled place. And then they came in and said, Allahu Akbar, it was us. We did it. We did this. No, you didn't do this. You guys are showing up for the selfies. And that's why it was so easy to target Qasem Soleimani, because he was so comfortable on the battlefield taking selfies with these militia guys. There was no developed intel, pattern of life for Soleimani. He was so comfortable walking, getting a latte at the airport after getting off a plane from Lebanon and walking with Mehdi al-Mohandes and getting into a Suburban. It was like, it's not a, we made them so comfortable. So that's one of the biggest,
let me ask one kind of related question here. I mean, just I guess what I want to know is, what is the worst case scenario for Israel in all of this that is realistic
This
in
is
your opinion? I know I'm again asking you to like predict, and it's impossible, but
Well, the
what's
worst
your
case
view?
scenario is if Iran already had a nuclear weapon and had the nuclear umbrella, and this was happening, and we're paving the way for that to happen. You know, the only country keeping Iran from going to a nuclear weapon is not the U.S. It's not Israel. It's Russia and China, the only countries that are keeping Iran from going to a bomb, because neither one of those countries wants the Islamic State of, the Islamic State of Iran having a nuclear weapon on their border, because they both border Iran.
Mm,
Uh, they they're not huge fans of religion, as you know. They're very pragmatic. They believe that Iran should always be right there at the edge in order to get concessions from the West and be able to open up their economy so that Russia and China can take advantage of it. It's not the U.S. that's keeping Iran from a nuclear weapon. It's Israel that can hit them before they develop one. But it's Russia and China saying, listen, just keep playing this game where you push it up to this level, and then the U.S. will just reward you.
mm.
And we'll try to keep them from conducting a military strike to set your nuclear program back 20 years. But the Israelis are prepared for that. The most dangerous course of action is one where Iran has a nuclear weapon in the future. So I think the most dangerous course of action right now is if U.S. commitment wanes. If we see this moral equivalency bullshit that empowers Iran, empowers Hezbollah, empowers these groups, if we see the United States continue to sit on their hands. An American died yesterday in a rocket attack in Iraq from a militia directed by Iran, but the American died of a heart attack. So it's not the same as being killed by the missile, but the heart attack was a result of the missile strike. So we're already seeing the Pentagon say, well, that's not really a combat-related death, but it is exactly a combat-related death, right? But it's a contractor, and the contractor is different from a U.S. service member. So they've now told the Iranians, you can kill contractors, but if you kill a U.S. service member, that's different. But I don't even think they've conveyed that yet.
Mm.
Remember when Kataib Hezbollah killed a U.S. contractor on December 27, 2019, we killed Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes on the 2nd of January 2020. It was because of the Narwez Hamid attack, but also because we didn't respond immediately. They stormed the embassy and they started perceiving that this was weakness. And like, okay, just do it. Take out the two main guys, and Iran backed down. Just like when Reagan did when he decimated their Navy in 88 during Operation Praying Mantis, they stood down. Israel knows that if they punch Iran in the face, they'll stand down. The Biden administration needs to focus everything on Iran. If you want American hostages released, you go directly to Iran, not to reward them, but to punish them, to start enforcing sanctions. Take that $6 billion back, cut off the $10 billion that's getting ready to go to them from Iraq, punish Iraq for being a life support system, make them feel the pain to get everybody released. If you want Hamas to stop, make Iran feel pain. If you want Lebanese Hezbollah to stop, make Iran feel pain. If you want, the Iraqi militias to stop, kill the Iraqi militias and then make Iran feel pain. We're not doing that. We're focusing on this is an Israel-Hamas issue. This is an Israel-Palestine issue. No, this is an Iran, Russia, China against the U.S. issue using an American ally to test U.S. resolve.
How concerned are you about Hezbollah escalating all of this?
They already are. They're skirmishes. Israel is fighting with them now. Hamas is being depleted, being destroyed. They're still able to launch rockets and missiles from Gaza. I don't know how, but they want more civilian casualties. They're hoping to sway opinion. They suffered a major PR loss with this hospital attack. They suffered a major PR loss today with the church attack that they said happened yesterday. So they're losing credibility with U.S. media and the Biden administration quickly, but they're still not losing that support in the Arab world, with all these protests. So, yeah. So
Okay.
Lebanese Hezbollah is already involved. This is what war with Iran looks like. The Houthis are launching missiles. The Iraqi militias are now an extension of the IRGC that they can deploy. The Lebanese Hezbollah is demonstrating the capability. Hamas is still there. The PIJ is still there. PIJ, I'm sorry. Palestinian Islamic Jihad, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
And the way to get this war to stop is to punish Iran directly. You could literally hit kinetic, you can have a kinetic strike against IRGC headquarters and facilities inside of Iran, and the Iranian people would not be upset about it. They may go out and protest because they have to, but they wouldn't be upset about it.
Yeah.
And something
Yeah, actually,
really
we won't talk about it now because we got to stop. But one question that does really interest me is the level of tension between the Iranian population as a whole and the Iranian regime. It's a pretty unstable situation, and it's another interesting thing to forecast how long the Iranian regime can last. But we'll have to save that. Go.
Just real quick, have you ever seen the video of the Iranians are supposed to walk across an American and Israeli flag and they choose not to? They walk around it.
Oh no, I've not seen that.
Yeah, the majority of the population is against the regime.
Right.
50% of that population that's against the regime is pro-Israel, pro-US, because they want to stop spending all the money on exporting terrorism.
Right.
They view their own government as a reason these things are happening.